in this case, war with Iran. So I think Witkoff is doing what Trump wants him to do, what Witkoff wants to do, and he's succeeding. But there's a lot of alignment of forces in Washington that don't want them to succeed. And part of those forces are trying to get rid of Hegseth. He goes on and on about deterrence and why he has to have a nuclear weapon, an undeclared nuclear weapon, or 2 or 3 or 100 or so, and is not a member of the NPT, not a member of any of the other agreements. He goes on and on about that, and goes on and on about Iraq attacking us. But he doesn't say anything about why he has nuclear weapons. He has nuclear weapons, so Tehran will disappear too. And Tehran knows that. Why else would Tehran ever make a decision to build him? He will be king. Now, he's sitting on a powder keg, as I said before. He's sitting on a powder keg. I don't know if he realizes it or not, but this business of what the head of Shin Bet and the courts are doing, what the people who are really angry at him over no concern for the hostages at all. I'm sure you've seen that expose that's making its way around the internet. I saw it on YouTube this morning, watched it all the way through a couple of times, about how absolutely criminal Blinken, Sullivan, and Biden were with regard to Netanyahu. How at every juncture where Biden could have called him back, all Biden did was push him forward. Where at every juncture where the United States had an opportunity to cut down on the killing a bit, Biden just opted out. And Blinken and Sullivan were right there with him the whole time. He could have gained so much stature by coming in and telling Miriam Adelson, for example, thanks for your money and getting me elected, but now I'm going to put an end to that slaughter in the Middle East. I'm going to just put an end to it. I'm going to tell Netanyahu he's got 2 choices, and both of them are the same thing. Stop, or I'll make you stop. I mean, he could have gained all kinds of international stature and all kinds of political stature domestically had he done something like that. Because the American people are turning to the tune of 57, 58, 59, 60% now against Israel. And it's just going to increase. It's not going to go down. It's just going to increase. And this expose on Biden, Blinken, and Sullivan and what they actually did in the time that they were in office from October 7th to the time they were out of office. I don't know how you do that in Israel. And I don't know that there's enough people in Israel who want to do that. It's kind of like the times of old with the Israelites when you see them marching off a cliff, and there are leaders and prophets amongst them who tell them the cliff is there. Tell them that the cliff is there because they dug it, built it, whatever, and they've avoided the Torah, they've avoided their God, they're worshiping Mammon, all this other kind of thing, and all of a sudden, and that's what Netanyahu represents. Netanyahu is not religious. He doesn't have a religious bone in his body. He's using people like Ben Gvir and Smotrich and others who do have religious bones that are corrupt as hell for his own political purposes, but every time this has happened in the past to, the Israelites, it's always been a case of, I'm going over the cliff. I'm going over the cliff. Whether it's Nebuchadnezzar destroying them and enslaving them and putting them into diaspora, or whether it's modern day Israel, where Israel, since 48, Israel has started every war it's ever been in. 67 war, 73 war, and certainly the ones subsequent. Israel is just built for war and built for destroying the people whose land it's stealing. And if you're going to come to grips with that and make some kind of agreement over how you're going to change in order to accommodate not only the Israeli Jews in the region, but also those within the Israeli state who are non-Jewish, make them first-class citizens, in other words, and accommodate the people whom you were exterminating in order to steal their land with their own state, that is a hell of a shift of thought and purpose. And I don't know if it's possible. I really don't know if it's possible. I'd be a way too over-the-top optimist to say that I think it is possible. My realist bones tell me that what's going to happen is what I've been saying all along, the destruction of the state of Israel. That's what's happened historically. The only person who's supposed to do that is the president of the United States. Now, this could have been, if I wanted to put a positive spin on it, it could be Waltz, the national security advisor, who definitely wants an attack, and Rubio, who is of that mind, and some of the members of the Congress who are of that mind, most notably Lindsey Graham from South Carolina. It could have been using them as tools to try and put more pressure on Iran. Witkoff is involved in negotiations that I think that Trump has a direct hand in, probably the only ones that he does have a direct hand in. And Witkoff seems to be doing exactly what he should be doing: calm, mild-mannered, diplomatic, pursuing a deal. But these other people don't want it. And if Trump is astute enough to use these other people's machinations within his own administration to put pressure on Iran, that's one thing. But that's dangerous business. That's very dangerous business. If he's not aware of it, or if he's only peripherally aware of it, or he doesn't give a damn about it and he just lets it go on, that's dangerous too, because you never know when the bureaucracy is going to pick up the pieces, as it were, and head off in the direction that you didn't want them to head off in, to try and set that off and at least balance it. Because at any time Bibi wants to, he can make Tehran disappear. Look at what the JCPOA did. It had provisions for putting enriched uranium more so than 3.7 or so percent in another country. And if it were necessary for something that was really cutting edge technology, cancer therapy, for example, you bring it back in from the other country, with the other country and the IAEA supervising that transshipment. That was all part of the JCPOA. So there are things you can do that will allow you to go beyond the 3.7 and to have enriched uranium for other uses if you can prove you have those other needs. And the JCPOA took care of that. And this new agreement could take care of that too, if you wanted to. Bibi knows all that. He just does not want anything to detract from his ability to stay in power. And the last bugbear he has to make sure he stays in power is Iran. And getting a war going with Iran, between Israel and the United States and Iran, would be the denouement of a magnificent career. That's the way Bibi looks at it. And the savior of his life in terms of prison time and so forth. Because once he eliminates Iran with the United States' help, no one's going to get rid of him. He will be king. Now, he's sitting on a powder keg. The names I was calling them weren't harsh enough. They were aiding and abetting Netanyahu in everything he's done in Gaza, and ultimately in the other places too, like Lebanon. So the United States' guilt in this is just humongous. I don't know if Trump understands that. He would be better positioned, but he can't do it because of what he set himself up as with regard to Israel. But he'd be better positioned to say not that Ukraine was Biden's war, because that's a lie. Trump was president from 2016 to, I mean, let's face it, you were there when some of the most horrible machinations took place with NATO. So it is your war, Donald, but he would be perfectly correct to say that Gaza is not his war. It's Biden, Blinken, and, what did I call them? Blinken, nod, and nudge, Victoria Nuland. It was their war. But he won't do that. He won't back away from that. Instead, he's coming up with these fancy plans about how to turn Gaza into a seaside resort. I think there's an innate recognition amongst a segment of the Israeli portion of the Israeli citizenry, the 7 million that are actually Jews. I don't know if it's significant enough to, let me put it bluntly, save the state of Israel as a liberal democracy at this particular point in time. I just don't know if it's enough. I know there are people there who understand the depth of Israel's crisis right now and want to do something to try and extract it from that depth. But they don't have political means to do it, because the body politic of Israel that would be necessary to cast out the devil, so to speak, and to bring in someone who is willing to work for peace is not strong enough. It's not deep enough. It's not profound enough. So I don't know how you, in what pretends to be a democracy, but is rapidly turning into an autocracy with him as the dictator. I don't know how you reach in there and find a mechanism to avoid civil war and the kind of turmoil that comes out of that, which will change things probably dramatically, but not necessarily positively, and do it peacefully. In other words, I don't know how you get rid of Bibi and find someone who is more like a Yitzhak Rabin, for example. I don't know how you do that in Israel. I mean, if you really want to parse it, Putin's right to a certain extent about the Nazis. He's right to a certain extent about to a large extent, about all the things that were happening from 2005 all the way up to 2014, and then sped up, and that were betrayals of either words made by NATO or by the United States or a NATO capital to Russia, or agreements actually signed, all fabricated in order to get Ukraine in a better position to fight Russia. So how do you deal with a side that has been so duplicitous when all you're doing is trying to protect the security of your CSTO, your country, whatever? I do believe that that's what Putin's purpose was in starting the special military operation. I don't think he had any choice. I don't condone the aggression, but at the same time, as a military professional, I understand why he did what he did. It was an existential threat to Russia from his perspective, looking at Russia's history and looking at what was happening and looking at what NATO was going to do in Ukraine, and Ukraine being a NATO member, and the expansion just continuing and continuing. Putin didn't have any choice. So now we're putting an end to that. And that's part of the element that wants Hegseth gone. That's part of the element that wants Trump gone, because they want that war, which is their war, Biden's war, Blinken's war, Sullivan's war, as much as Gaza was. They want that war to go on until they've won. They still want that. And Trump's up against that, and Hegseth is up against that. And that's some of the uniformed military too. So you're Putin looking at this, and you're saying to yourself, good God Almighty, how do I deal with these people? Or you're Lavrov, how do I deal with these people? Here's the man I'm dealing with. His name is Witkoff, and he's a real estate agent from New York, or a real estate salesman from New York, and he's Trump's good friend. Okay, I can deal with it. What's Rubio's role? Rubio's Secretary of State. Oh, right. I'm okay with that. Whatever you want to do, but let's get this war over. And then you're faced with the fact that you can't get the war over. And you've invested a lot of blood and treasure in it, as has Ukraine. But Ukraine was doing it on behalf of the United States and secondarily on behalf of NATO, not on behalf of itself, except those young men and women who went out there in the trenches and fought for their soil. And that makes it even more tragic. They died too, and their death was just as painful as those Russians who died. And they died for a lie. They died for a lie, and they died for a leader who is a liar. And they died for leaders ultimately in the empire who were liars, Biden, Blinken, and Sullivan, to lead the pack. Now Trump's trying to say, I'm a truth teller, and I divest myself of all that. Well, you were there for 4 years, and you supported everything that was going on in Ukraine during that time. Some of it was very nefarious, and part of the duplicity I'm now objecting to, if I'm Putin. I don't know how you deal with this from the other side. You just try to get what you've won through blood and treasure. And then how do you go to building a new security architecture in Europe and bringing Russia into that architecture and having a whole new Europe in terms of security? How do you do that? How do you go from this rancor and the disgust that Putin and Lavrov and people like them in Russia must have for the West? It must be deep and profound, to a better world afterwards, even 9 or 10 years down the road. To me, that's the huge question. I mean, you could get this stopped in terms of the killing and in terms of the absolutely senseless war. You could get it stopped, but how do you reconcile? How do you reconcile? And Putin's got that concern to worry about too. How does he think that once it's stopped, quote unquote, Ukraine won't reopen it? every time he turns around on some aspect of the border. They won't reopen it. That's what we say. Oh, Russia will start this over again. They'll come in. Oh, they'll come into Estonia or Latvia or Lithuania. Or my God, they'll come into Poland or whatever. That's pure poppycock. And if it were to happen, it would be because something went wrong in the agreement and Putin sees duplicity again. No, it's a very potent statement when you think about Iran for a minute. You know, the planes are flying over the Israeli probably caused fire near Bandar Abbas. The Russian planes are flying every hour over it, dropping water and chemicals. Immediately, it reminded me of what we did when the earthquake hit. Where was it? Bam, in Iran, 2006, I think it was. And George W. Bush, Colin Powell went over there and said, "We got to help." And Bush said, "Got the firefighters, got the search dogs, got the parties, you know, the teams of police and everything already going." And we were already flying help to Iran. And they sent us nice notes afterwards telling us thank you for all the help that we gave them. And we did. Enemy is an enemy, but they were in, if memory serves, some 30,000 people or something like that. It was a terrible situation. Russia's there just like that now. Russia is the United States now. They're over there. They're flying planes and dropping water and chemicals and everything, trying to help the Iranians fight this fire, which I have no doubt the Israelis started. So Russia is the new humanitarian in the world now. Russia is the country that rushes off to help its friends and its allies in whatever dire circumstance they might get into. Isn't that something? It's shifted. It's shifted. We are the country that's backing the murderer in the Levant, and Russia's the country that's putting out fires at Bandar Abbas.